The Southern Poverty Law Center describes the Ku Klux Klan as one of the most infamous and oldest American hate groups. Most commonly known for its actions during the Civil Rights Movement, the founding of the Klan dates back to Reconstruction era in the United States. There have been many attempts to stop this organization, yet it still exists.
I don't want no pardon for anything I've done. I can't take up my musket and fight 'em now no more. But I ain't gonna love 'em, that is certain sure. And I don't want no pardon for what I was and am. I won't be reconstructed, and I don't care a damn.
In the middle of the 19th century, the United States was in the midst of war. After more than 620,000 casualties and 4 years of sacrifice, the cannons fell silent.
The Union victory brought about many changes in the social and economic structure of the nation. Many of these changes were brought about through various pieces of legislation.
The first of the post-war amendments to the Constitution of the United States of America was the 13th Amendment, ratified on December 6, 1865, which ended slavery by stating, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction."
The 14th Amendment to the Constitution provided citizenship and equal protection of the law to all persons born or naturalized in the United States. On February 3, 1870, the 15th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States was ratified. This amendment gave the right to vote to all men whether they were former slaves or not by stating, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude."
As the amendments were passed and African Americans were given the right to vote, there was this possibility for political power for African Americans that had never existed before.
They would be elected to public offices at the federal level. They would also be elected to some offices at the state level, and they would call for education. There was a growth of schools in the South. Abolitionists would come down. They'd establish schools to teach the children of slaves and former slaves to read and write and do basic math and so on and so forth.
It was the Republican Party that was instrumental in pushing these amendments through to ratification. Former Confederate soldiers and other Southerners used their connections from the war to try to reverse the changes brought about by the Northern Republicans.
They'd come from the same place before, they'd served in the same units during the war, and then afterwards they're working together to try to bring about these changes, or at least kind of put things back the way they were, is the way that they're looking at it, to try to put the Democratic Party back into power.
The Ku Klux Klan was founded in 1867 by Nathan Bedford Forrest along with a group of Confederate veterans in Pulaski, Tennessee. Like other organizations, the KKK members created their own rituals, costumes, and hierarchy from a mismatch of precedents and ancient mythology.
And so their goals and objectives in part were to maintain order, but it also came about because there was a sentiment that freed former slaves were going to get too many rights, and there was a real fear of that.
A lot of white Southerners absolutely hated that, and they were really motivated to try to stop that. And the best way to do that is to try to undermine these Republican governments who were supporting and, in fact, in many cases protecting the freed people.
As the Klan continued to spread, its primary goal became terrorizing blacks who challenged white supremacy by voting, teaching, or acquiring land.
But the Klan's methods was largely fear and intimidation, and oftentimes lynching was a means of that, or the burning cross, or as a sign that the Klan was present. And then, of course, just the talk. Just talking to people and saying, well, the Klan's here, and though everything's going to change.
And it's not just African Americans that they're attacking, they're also attacking white people who are, they see as collaborators, people who are working with or part of the Republican structure. And, over time, it's going to be in various places pretty successful.
The election of 1868 was crucial to the future of the South. The candidates were Ulysses S. Grant for the Republican Party and Horatio Seymour for the Democrats. The Klan recognized the importance of the election and used violence to intimidate Republican supporters as they prepared to go to the polls.
As the elections neared, a number of crimes were committed in 3 important states. Over 2,000 murders were committed in Kansas. More than 2,000 threats and beatings occurred in Georgia. And 1,000 African Americans were killed in Louisiana as an attempt to weaken Republican support.
These acts of violence contributed to the victories of the Democrats in both Georgia and Louisiana. Despite the efforts of the Klan, the Republican Party won the election, placing Ulysses S. Grant as President of the United States.
As time passed, the Klan continued its acts of violence against African Americans and Republican supporters.
And as much as, local state Republican governments try to stop it, and in some cases they do, usually by trying to call it the state militia or to suppress it through other threats of violence, basically. But ultimately what it takes is the federal government to get involved.
By March of 1871, the violence had reached a point where President Grant requested legislation to deal with the violence in the South. The Ku Klux Klan Act was introduced in an attempt to enforce the provisions of the 14th Amendment. It legitimized the use of martial law to suppress organizations like the Klan.
In 9 counties in South Carolina, martial law was enacted, and the federal military began to seek out members of the Klan.
And they relied on informers to tell them where the Klan was at, and they treated it like a military force, and they sought those men out and arrested as many as they could and imprisoned some. And sought to break their influence in their communities.
December 1871 marked the beginning of the South Carolina Ku Klux Klan trials. For 2 months, Judges Hugh L. Bond and George S. Bryant listened to the defendants make their cases. The jury was predominantly composed of African Americans and white Republicans.
5 men, John Mitchell, Robert Mitchell, Thomas Whitesides, John Miller, and Dr. Edward Avery were charged with intimidating African Americans from voting in the 1870 election, as well as conspiring to prevent black voters in the 1872 election, both of which were violations of the Enforcement Act passed earlier that year.
Robert Mitchell, Thomas Whitesides, and John Miller received lighter sentencing due to their minimal involvement in the Klan. John Mitchell was highly involved and received 5 years and a $1,000 fine. Dr. Edward Avery was free on bail and fled once he realized he would be found guilty of numerous charges.
It does suppress the activity for a while. It's not that they try every single Klan member, but they have enough of these trials that it sort of brings it to a dull roar. The North gets tired of it. They don't have the will to prosecute these things anymore. Essentially, the American public in the North and I think the politicians, they think the problem's solved. They've given political rights to African Americans, they've done everything they need to do, they're tired of the war, they're tired of Reconstruction, and they back away from it. They don't prosecute these crimes anymore. They don't intervene when, it's really clear elections are rigged. And, by 1876, it's essentially, Reconstruction's essentially over.
The federal government intervention was successful in slowing down the violence and corruption the Klan was causing in the South.
Unfortunately, the Klan was not totally eradicated, and the reappearance of this group in the 20th century provides evidence that the Klan is a powerful and lasting force.
Was an am, I won't be reconstructed, and I don't care a damn.